Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Retail Insider. Joining me today is April Sabral, who is founder, president of retailu. Thank you for joining us today, April.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, it's been an interesting time, obviously, in the retail industry over the last 2 years plus. Let's talk about the importance of leadership. And this is an area that obviously that you do a lot of work in, leadership and leadership training. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of leadership in the retail industry in times of crisis?
Yeah, I mean, leadership, I could talk about this all day. It's my favorite subject because I think everything starts from the top. And I think leadership to me is not a title, right? Like we have the C-suite, we have the director level, we have the district manager, the store manager level, but it's not about the title. It's really about the behavior and how you show up every day. And today, more than ever, we know that we've gone through a really tough time and our field teams are really feeling it, right? With all the complexities of everything they've had to deal with. So leadership now more than ever, I mean, I think leadership's always been important, Mario. I will say that because like after leading teams for, 3 decades in the field operations, it's just necessary. But I think what's changed is the amount of empathy that has to be shown now and compassion compared to like, let's say 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, it was always an important skill, but more now than ever, because we can't make assumptions about how people are feeling. We can't judge them on the things that we used to. And we need to be there to listen to our team more than ever. And that does require a skill, it requires practicing the art of listening. It requires the practice of asking questions. It requires leaders to do things a little bit differently and create these opportunities where people can actually open up and share how they're feeling. And so we need to slow down a little bit and take that time.
When you mentioned that, about the retail sector specifically, I'm just thinking, when it comes to staff and employees, right? This one of the areas that, including hospitality, restaurants and bars, that have been the hardest hit in all this. And, that sector seems to be still struggling with retaining and finding employees. So I guess in that environment, that becomes even more important, that those skills of leadership.
Yeah. And, I wrote a book through the pandemic, right, called The Positive Effect, A Retail Leader's Guide to Changing the World. And it was all about leadership. And the one thing that I have learned throughout my journey of leading teams, and this is what people will always tell me and why they want to work for me, is that I've always practiced the art of having a positive effect on the people I work with. And so through that journey of that book, really unpacking what those behaviors looked like was the ability to ignite positive emotions in people that work for me so that they have the positive emotions towards the company. And, we cannot any longer lead in a way that doesn't actually ignite those positive emotions, because there's just too much going on for people now that they'll just jump ship and say, I just don't want to do this anymore. We've had so many people leave the industry, and people are leaving because they don't feel appreciated and they don't feel good. And they're dealing with all the complexities that's happening in the store level, right? Or, the closures, the openings, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's how you ignite that positive emotion. And I like to call it like the positive engagement formula, right? It's like you as a leader, you create those positive emotions by the way that you behave, which I wrote about, how to accept, create, teach. And then the second piece of it is how you help people be more competent. Because like positive energy, positive engagement plus competency creates that positive engagement formula. And that's the magic. And so we have to be so conscientious of that. But what it requires of leaders is to be very self-aware. It requires us to be present. It requires us to pay attention, and it requires us to be self-aware. I have this conversation with people all day because they think people are okay and they're actually not. And it's because they're not present and they're not self-aware of how they're creating this, positive engagement formula in their business.
Yeah. One of the interesting things when it comes to this whole area of leadership, and I think it goes beyond retail, but you know, what I find over the years is, people go through the motions, right? And they go through and do all the training and all that stuff because it's part of the requirement of being in an executive position, et cetera. But if it's not genuine, it's not going to work, right?
100%. And I always say, trying to sell leadership development, let me tell you, is a hard thing because everybody's like, well, what's the ROI on it?
Yeah.
Like selling a technology, a communication platform, there's an ROI. You can see it right away. You can see completion rates. You can see people digesting content. But I always say it's about the ROE. It's about the return on expectations. When a leader's a great leader and when they're being genuine and their team are following them because you see a return on expectations in the stores. And I'm speaking specifically around stores because that's my expertise, because I've led stores, for how many years, but you see it, like you can see when you go into a store, the service is great. You can see that the merchandising is well done. You can see that the promos and the marketing's in place. You can see it in the customer reviews. It's a return on expectations. So I would challenge people that if they're not getting a return on their expectations, then to think about leadership development and the benefit of that, and that being a really great strategy and an investment that doesn't cost a lot, by the way. It's not like $1 million ticket, like a technology platform, that maybe they need to, look at it a little bit different and take some ownership on that and say, okay, we're not getting a return on our expectations. Why is that? Because I can tell you in all my years, when I have made a change in a leader because I'm not getting a return on expectations, and put another leader in place that's a great leader, you can see it turn around immediately, right? So to me, it's just one of those harder things to quantify. But I think if you look at it a little bit differently like that, it could kind of change your mindset on it.
Okay. What do you, when this period of time, obviously with a lot of chaos and upheaval, et cetera, what have companies done when it comes to training and training of people? Have they kind of stepped back a bit because they're dealing with the crisis, or have many thought that, heck, we need this to deal with the crisis? What's been the reaction?
I think some companies have not done enough. And then I think some companies have done a lot. What I see when I'm speaking to like CEOs, about their training and development, some of it is focused more on operational stuff because they just had to get through it and they had to change a lot of operations. But the ones that recognize that they now have to go back and invest in their people because the investment for over whatever need the last 10 years was really in omni technology, kind of bridging that gap from store to online, because they had to do that in the last couple of years, right? Because if you didn't have that sorted out, you kind of lost a lot of business, just stores not being open. But I think now the ones that see, now I have to invest in my people because otherwise I'm losing them. And I have to really train them and help them be better at their job and give them that career growth. Those are the ones that are coming out now, retaining people, seeing positive results. And I see that in my clients, but I think it's a mixed bag. I honestly do. And I just think it depends on the amount of challenges that you're facing. But here's what I'll say. Don't put your people strategy and your training at the bottom of the list. It should be at the top of the list, because employees want three things from the company they work for or the leaders they work for. They want to feel like you care about them. They want to feel like they can trust you. And they want to feel like they're having growth and development that's going to help them further their career. Everybody works to make more money and to grow in their career. I don't know anybody that gets up every day and is like, I don't want more money. I don't want to grow. So if you're not giving them that, they're going to go and look for it from somewhere else.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? When you bring that up, because I don't know why a lot of businesses don't get this, right? Is that your first line of interaction with customers are usually your staff, right? And if your staff's not happy, well, two things, right? If they're not happy and if they're not trained well enough to do what they're supposed to do, that leads to a bad experience with the customer, right? And
Yeah,
and
but I'll say this. I think a lot of people don't do it because they have assumptions that their managers are already doing it and are doing a good job with it.
yeah.
Listen, like I was a leader of many teams, and I made that mistake of like, oh, I promoted this person, they were really good, they know what they're doing, they know how to coach, they know how to train. But do you know how many directors I sit with their DMs right now and do development planning sessions with them that they don't know how to do it? And the reason why I knew how to do it was because I became a John C. Maxwell certified coach. I took another coaching certificate.
Yeah.
I studied leadership and training while I was in the role. So that's why, and I just assumed that's what people did, but they don't. So I think a lot of people make assumptions that just because people have a title and this part of their job description, that they're really good at it, but it's not necessarily the case, right? Like you've got to study and practice to get really excellent at anything you do in life.
So I'm curious, based on what you just said, are there born leaders?
Yes, there are born leaders, but like anything, you can be born naturally athletic, but if you have a coach that helps you excel that natural ability, you're going to become excellent at it. And that's what I truly believe. I think, yes, there are born leaders, but you have to gain the competency to lead other people and develop other leaders, because maybe you're a great leader, but you don't know how to develop other leaders, right? Maybe you can embody that with a team, but when you have to translate that to somebody else, you don't know how to do that, because that is a skill. So, but I also think that leaders can be developed. I've worked with so many people that came into retail like, oh, this is just my first job, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then now fast forward 20 years, because I've been coaching and mentoring them, they're in a director's seat. They didn't even see that. So, I think that it can be taught and you are born with it, but I think it's a combination, and it's development and focus, right?
When you look at this last 2 years plus, what do you think the key lessons that retail leaders have learned through this period of time?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think ambiguity and embracing it, I would say, is the number one, which when I went into the C-suite, I fastly recognized that I was going to have to live in ambiguity because I couldn't control everything anymore. I had like 5,000 employees. And I think that in itself is a number one lesson learned. And then second to that, if you're not okay with ambiguity because you're a planful, tactical, structured person, then you have to be a very positive person, because everybody is looking at you to set that tone, and you can't become frustrated. What you have to do is become vulnerable and just have a positive mindset and say, okay, I don't know what the next step is, but I'm going to be vulnerable enough with my team to let them know I'm going through this with them. And then I'm going to have a positive mindset to ignite everybody to get moving forwards. And I think those two things in itself is like number one lesson learned. And if you are having a hard time with that, I don't know how you're going to function in the next 10 years of retail, because it's just forever changing, right?
What do you think, as we come out of the pandemic, what do you think the key challenges are for retail leaders right now and into the near future?
Yeah, I think it's going to be staffing, winning back talent. I was, supporting a retailer in the US, a Canadian retailer, for the last 6 months. And just the amount of open requisitions that we had, and we were able to close them. So I think the war on talent is going to continue, because I think that people figured out other ways to do things. And I think minimum wage is a problem. So I think the wages are going to hinder us if we don't figure out a better way. And I get it, because you're only making so many sales, right? So the store can only have a wage cost of this percent. And that's 100% true. But if we're looking at the business holistically as a whole, and we've developed more omni-channel online, how can we save money in other areas of the business so that it doesn't impact that store experience? Because we know that stores are not going away. People say bricks and mortar's dead. Don't believe it. Everybody's I'm in the States, people are still shopping, and it's always going to be. So how do we make sure the store experience is maintained? And that's going to require some investment in those people that work in those stores. And it may not look like the traditional wage cost percent of your sales model in a store environment. So I think we have to start getting creative with that. Otherwise, we're not going to win back talent. You can see it now. Like, you walk through the mall and you'll see we're hiring this dollar amount. I didn't see that 5 years ago. People were not that transparent about what they were paying. So that means the talent war is real.
Yeah, exactly. And as you look at the current environment, are there any trends out there in the retail sector that you're identifying and seeing right now?
Ooh, that's a good question too. I mean, I would say the trend of direct to consumer opening up stores. I've seen that quite a bit in the last 6 months, right? Like big companies going out because maybe they didn't have a good balance sheet. And then these direct to consumer brands coming into the malls and like opening up stores so that they can get their product in front of a customer. So I think that's really interesting. I think fashion trends, like over the last couple of years, everybody was in casual sweats. Like somebody said to me the other day, I just want to buy a pair of heels. I'm going back to the office and I can't find a pair of heels. Like I was like, God, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people are going back to work now that they weren't doing a couple of years ago. So that kind of thing. And then just the whole, you know, customer journey has changed, you know, make it easy for somebody to purchase, whether that be in store, online. Like if you're in a store and they don't have it and they'd be like, oh, you can go home and order it online. No, don't let me leave the store.
Yeah.
Like figure out a way to let me buy it while I'm in the store or give me the options. So I think the customer journey, people figured out how to shop online that never did shop online. So we have to keep making that seamless and easy for the customers.
One last question, and it's regarding going back to leadership. I'm curious about who are the types of companies that are more accepting of taking training and for their leaders. Are the bigger companies, smaller companies? You know, what's your thoughts on that?
I think that there's a lot of big companies that have the leadership development courses in place, but don't do a necessarily great job of follow up, the coaching, the follow up, and holding people accountable to the expectations. Because I've seen that through the last year. And I think the middle range companies that are probably about 200 million, maybe about 200 stores, those are the ones that actually are embracing that development right now because they probably don't have the structures in place yet to kind of have like the big ones, like the Sephoras and the LVMHs that already have it. They have the universities, the Apples, the Starbucks, they have it. But those middle range ones, like, you know, just from my days at David's Tea, they are the ones that are now embracing it and see the benefit of it. And I'm really excited by that because I think that there's so much potential for them to grow. And so, yeah, I think those are the ones that are like really, that's what I've seen anyway in my client base, just with retailu. And I see a lot of people signing up and just doing their own development because they're not getting it. It's really interesting. So I think people are hungry for it, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about, you know, coming out of this and seeing where this is going to go and just supporting more retailers develop their leaders.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks very much, April, for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
All right, super. That was April Sabral, who is founder and president of retailu. I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.